This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day. If you could learn to work and play and get along with each other.
Welcome everybody to Wednesday War Games episode 22. Liam is on excursion. He's a young boy. He's actually looking for a home because no one will give him money. Or no one will take his money for a home. So I've had to replace him. I've usually referred to Liam as my loyal and steadfast co-host, but no. He's gone forever, or until next week. So I have drafted in a replacement. I guess still technically host the Rest Roundtable, Rob and Reid. Rob, how are we doing?
Perhaps, maybe still co-host. Who knows? Not even me, really. Hello, I am Robin, and it's a pleasure to be here, Garrett.
In order to test your knowledge and see are you fit to co-host this podcast, we put everyone through the test of, can you recite all the lyrics of Judas?
I could.
Can you actually?
I think. Could I? I'm not sure. Like, I think I could go from the beginning.
You're beautiful. This is not the first podcast I've ever done with you that has just descended into Rob Reid's lyrics.
I am cold like December.
This is actually a lot like the experience of AEW Dynamite, because as we'll get to when we talk about the show, and I'll just talk over Rob in the background, it's fine. But Jericho now lays out for the crowd to sing his theme song every time. So he forces the sing along now, even when he's not wrestling, even when they're not playing the full theme. He makes people stand there. Well, actually, he stands there and waits. He doesn't make people do anything, but people sing his song. I'm waiting to lay out on the "What Have I Become," and then he can kick into the chorus with like the full gusto of everything that he has.
Is there something left of me to say in the wreckage of my life? I'm becoming. Judas in my life.
And that's where they cut it off. So that's the test pass. That's
where we'll stop. I'm not sure where I would go from there. I feel like somewhere in my mind are the follow-up lyrics, but not sure if they'd be at the top.
Like that's where they cut the theme song. So like that's all you need to know if you go to an All Elite Wrestling. You need to get the Judas in my mind. That's all. That's as far as you need to learn.
Like it is in my rotation. It does sometimes pop up when I'm in the shower. So it's a song that I've listened to probably more than I care to admit. But what a theme!
Now you have to sing Rhea Ripley's theme song in the interest of balance.
You know what? That is also in my shower rotation, but it annoys me. It annoys me because, like, I enjoy it for, like, the first 45 seconds-ish, and then it's like, this is just the same thing over and over again. But, you know, YouTube music, you can't do, like, the skip after 45 seconds thing. That'd be useful. Anyway, complete sidetrack.
So yes, as always, we're talking about All Elite Wrestling and the other one too, and WWE NXT. Because AEW was the preferred show last week, we will cover it first. We'll do a preamble. Rob, what's your relationship with All Elite Wrestling and NXT?
Right, so I will admit right up front, to save me from angry tweets, or maybe it will lead to angry tweets, who knows. I am not a regular weekly viewer of both shows in their entirety. I will pop in for hype segments, so in general, that means I see usually about half an hour to 45 minutes of Dynamite each week. A lot more since the beginning of the year, admittedly. A lot less before that, when they were, really going hard on the Dark Order and stuff like that. And then NXT, it's really just the occasional match, because not a whole lot of stuff getting hype out of that, especially in, kind of the stuff that I enjoy. Long-term wise, though, NXT has been something that I've enjoyed a lot, especially the tag division over probably the last 3-4 years now, basically ever since that American Alpha revival era. The tag division has been one of my favourite consistent things in wrestling, albeit basically one match every takeover. It's not like a whole huge amount of something, but it's been one of my favourite consistent things in wrestling ever since. Whereas AEW, it's been something I kind of have struggled with a little bit because it's never quite been what I hoped it would be, but recently I've been learning to love what it is. It's not quite the pure sports that, let's be honest, it was probably never going to be, but it hinted that it might be, and it got me all excited because I'm the pure sports wrestling guy. But recently, basically since the turn of the year, I've incredibly enjoyed a lot of what they've put out, and I've kind of gone, okay, it's not that pure sports thing. It is more of like the story style, the storytelling genre of wrestling, but it's a damn good presentation and damn good version of that.
Yeah, it's been very strange to, like, as you've watched AEW find an identity, which is kind of understandable. They're a new company. There are a bunch of new creative minds as well, a bunch of people who have not worked in creative capacities in wrestling at all, basically, all trying to mush together all their individual visions of what pro wrestling should be. And that you felt it. You really felt that for a while. It's like, you have these people over here doing this thing, and these people over here doing this thing, and there's some of that pure sports. And look at all these records, and sometimes the records don't make a great deal of sense. Sometimes people who have never won a match are ranked above people who have won matches. And I don't care about your arguments. For people are like, oh, in college sports they take into account the quality victories. But yes, one victory, no matter over who, is better than a loss. Neither here nor there. And eventually, I think they did ease all that out as they worked out the kind of the more Cody, Tony Khan centric product that I think they've ended up being, and it's much better off for it.
Yes, it already into its lifespan, it feels a lot more coherent than it did, and that's a lot of props to that, because I can imagine it's not an easy. It probably can't be easy being in a room with a bunch of friends saying, yeah, we're going to have to kind of cut your creative ideas because they're not very good. Sorry, friend, but not really a fan of what you think about wrestling, despite you dedicating your life to it. So what I think is going to be in charge now, I can't imagine that was a fun conversation, but the product is better for it.
I'd love to record those meetings. They should record those meetings. It's like, Matt, your idea is terrible.
Like, I can just imagine, like, the meeting after that Dark Order episode where they closed out the show and it got awful reviews. I can just imagine Tony Khan kind of sitting there going, like, just, giving knowing looks, being like, did I tell you? I kind of told you. Let's go in a different direction. Let's go over here instead.
Which one of us has had to delete our Twitter this week? I'm just gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say.
Like, even the little snippets you kind of hear of, like, Cody saying, like, oh, I love Kenny, but I don't like him. Like, that just gives you a little bit of insight to what it must be like. It must be some juicy stuff.
It's all the infighting that you hear about, all the unreported infighting. All Elite Wrestling opened with Jon Moxley, new AEW champion Jon Moxley, who won the belt against Chris Jericho at Revolution, coming to the ring, doing his big celebration promo, which, I don't know, is fairly generic. It's like, I did it for you, which is like every babyface celebration promo ever, which both you can't knock him for, but also, come on, John, you can do better than this belt, this title win is for you, and I'm going to be a fighting champion. That's every babyface. And then Chris Jericho comes out, interrupts him. Jericho bloody-blads for a while, before saying that if Jon Moxley doesn't walk out of here, if Jon Moxley does walk out of here on his own 2 feet tonight, he'll leave AEW for 60 days.
30 days and then pushed up to 60 days. He doubled down.
I love the way Chris Jericho, he doesn't even need to be prompted to double down. He's like, 30 days. No, 60 days.
Yeah, this whole thing, the highlight was probably the Judas sing-along, which, probably says all it needs to be said. It wasn't awful, it was fine, and it's a segment that probably will get some criticism for being very Raw-esque.
It feels very Raw-esque.
But the thing is, like, the thing that makes it so bad with Raw is that it's every episode, whereas, obviously, Dynamite, probably more weeks than not at this point, is opening with a match. So, having it as... The problem with Raw is that every show ends up with someone coming out to the ring talking and getting interrupted and challenging and blah-de-blah-de-blah. We all know the standard Raw trope. That hasn't happened a ton with AEW. It's happened this week. It set up something. It wasn't anything to blow your socks off that you need to go out and watch, but it was fine.
It's also full-on charming Chris Jericho. My favorite part was him giving out that he spent 4 weeks preparing to wrestle a one-eyed man, and it was totally unfair that he could see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you have to be really charismatic to get away with that, and goddamn Chris is. Because if that came from someone with a tiny bit less charisma, it's just like, this is cartoony bullshit, and, like, it's not compelling in any way. Whereas he did it, it's like, this is cartoony bullshit, and it's brilliant. It's perfect for him. He has been a revelation of how good he's been at playing almost like a WWE-esque character outside of WWE, and it's just works so well.
He is basically that satire of WWE, except good.
Yeah, he stands out because you can sense the little bit of freedom that he's got, and he stands out because he's not in WWE, so he stands out from the rest of the roster. There are elements of it that shouldn't work, but he just carries with his charisma, and there's elements of it that are just wonderful in that they almost harness meme culture in a stupid way, but it just all works. It's what a man Chris Jericho is. What a man.
He is Wrestling Observer best on interviews with a very good cause.
I had not seen that, but well deserved.
well deserved. You didn't stringently go through the Wrestling Observer Awards?
I did not. I've only just got back in straight for this podcast, so dedicated to you, Garrett. Dedicated.
So that sets up our main event later tonight of Jericho and Sammy Guevara against Jon Moxley and Darby Allin. That takes us on to who doesn't love a Dark Order 8-man tag team match. The Dark Order were defeated by Colt Cabana and SCU in a fun, if kind of forgettable, 8-man tag team match. Yeah,
it was fine. It was a pretty good debut for, I guess, kind of debut for Cabana, wrestling debut for Cabana. It kind of, for the people who may be less familiar with him, which it's probably a decent chunk of the audience, I thought it was a good introduction. It got him over well, and it gave Dark Order a loss, so that, I think they were going into this one, they were number one in the rankings, and they probably don't want them there, so it was a good excuse to kind of bump them down a little.
It's an interesting problem for the AEW tag team division at the moment, because Kenny and Hangman are champions. They've beaten the Young Bucks, they've defeated SCU, they've beaten the Lucha Bros. In theory, Dark Order, are they next, or do they start pushing up maybe Best Friends into that spot? And when do Kenny and Hangman explode? And who do they explode against? All these questions for the tag team division.
Maybe Butcher and the Blade or something like that, yeah.
Oh no.
Not a fan. Now this might be something where, because I only watch the hype bits of Dynamite, so unsurprisingly I don't see a ton of Dark Order every week. Does Uno always wrestle in the vest, or is that new?
I think that he didn't always, but it's not new, but it was a conscious change, I think. Maybe after Christmas.
It's a definite improvement.
And like they're one of the best tag teams in the company. It's just the whole shtick is what holds them back. They're undeniably Smash Bros. It's a tremendous tag team. They've had good tag team matches in AEW as well. I don't think they've quite had a great tag team match yet. So them against it's probably not the worst idea to give them a television program against Kenny and Hangman.
They've had very good Bucks style matches in the past, and Kenny and Hangman wrestle a pretty similar style to the Bucks, so there's no reason why it can't be very good, other than maybe that they're not very over at the moment. But it'd be a good way to maybe get them a bit more over.
So after the match, Evil Uno cuts a promo. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. The Exalted One is still near, but not here. And they're still rolling. I wonder, how long can they tease the Exalted One before people lose interest? Because I feel like we're reaching that critical mass. Like, if it's not the next week or the week after, it'll reach the stage where it's like people will start being like, all right, I'll just tune out the Dark Order until whoever the Exalted One is. Do you have a prediction for the Exalted One, Rob?
See, my hope a few weeks ago was that they do the thing that's rarely done in wrestling, and that the red herring is actually the reveal, and that it would have been Chris Daniels. And he would have just kind of gone back to his early Ring of Honor Prophecy character. I would have quite liked that, but it obviously doesn't look like they're going in that direction now. So My gut, I think, is similar to yours in that Matt Hardy is not actually coming and he's just going for leverage and then probably going to show up again at WrestleMania. So, honestly, I have very little idea.
Someone suggested this in the Voices of Wrestling Stack. I don't remember who it was, so I can't give them credit, but I think it's a very good idea. I think they should reveal it as Matt, even if Matt Hardy's not signed. Reveal it as Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy comes out, Dark Order are like, Matt Hardy, and then they turn on him. And that's like the Evil Uno is actually the Exalted One all along. But I think that would, like, because it can't be Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy's super duper popular. He'd be a big baby face. It makes no sense that it's Matt Hardy. But if it's Matt Hardy and they turn on him, that's good heat for the Dark Order.
Like, storyline-wise, it kind of makes no sense, but...
Don't worry about it. It's a Dark Order. You don't have to think about it.
It would work. I agree.
Wrestling doesn't have to work on a logical level. Wrestling has to work on an emotional level. And that's all you need. You don't... Once your heart accepts it, rather than your brain, you're fine.
See, this is why I have so many problems with wrestling, because I don't really have that heart thing. I'm all the robotic analysis, which leaves me far too upset far too often. I've chosen the wrong hobby, really.
Yeah, there's no feeling in the world. There was no feeling when you watched Big Swole and Leva Bates either, though, was there?
That was... I was actually impressed by that match. I was impressed by how, in such a short match, Leva managed to pack so many awkward moments.
Yeah, she's not very good.
She took like 2 moves and she was out of position for like 3 of them somehow. Like, how's that happened? There was that one bit where like they circled round each other for a bit because
very strange.
They were wrongly positioned, and then there was that bit where like Leva hit a move and then they kind of awkwardly wandered around for a bit and then she kind of jumped into the arms of Swole to take them. This was really bad.
It was only 80 seconds long as well.
Like, squash matches shouldn't be able to be that bad. Like, it was really an indictment of the AEW women's division with, like, if you don't have the depth to have a because, Swole didn't cover herself in glory, but surely you've got, like, some women there that you're not currently pushing that you could have put in the Leva spot, but apparently not.
And we had Britt Baker on commentary, which I assume is building to Swole against Britt Baker, which I'm sure will be so much better.
I mean, I get the sense that that's a joke, but it'll probably be a little bit better. It can't get much worse. So.
The bar has been set so low.
See, that's the on-the-sly way to make Britt look good.
This was a bad Britt week, actually. Britt is a very variable character where occasionally she's like entertaining and occasionally she's just very boring. And I don't remember, fair enough, this match wasn't long enough for her to make a particularly large impression, but I don't remember a single thing she said on commentary, so... She
said, like, I think it was Excalibur said, like, oh, so you're familiar with Swole from being in a battle royal with her, and she was just like, was she? Oh, I had no idea.
Oh, that was a good line.
That's an okay line. Yeah, I mean, it was 80 seconds. Like, it was kind of weird to have her out there on commentary for such a short period, but I guess they just kind of wanted to get her on TV.
That's basically to say, when they do Swole against Britt Baker, it doesn't, I guess, come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Cody comes out, he's not that well, is he upset? He's more like, you beat me fair and square, Max, which... Or well, what did he talked for a while before he was interrupted.
He did a weird thing where he was like, I was annoyed initially professionally, then it was personal, now it's professional again because losing meant I won less money, and I was like, that's really weird angle to go with it.
Also, Matt, like MJF cheated as well, so like it's not like you beat him clean.
I don't know which version you saw. I was watching the fight version, so I was seeing through the ad breaks as well, his like promo to the crowd and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like the promo wasn't very good, but like he's got such a connection and such charisma that it really worked. But like when you actually like thought about what he was saying, you were like, that's like not a very good reaction to what just happened the previous week. And like, it's fine because the go away from this whole segment was the Jake Roberts stuff that followed up, but it was an odd way to follow up what was meant to be kind of like, I've been screwed out of a big win, I thought.
You see, and Jake Roberts then buries him for taking it so lightly.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of works.
That's true.
But yeah, it's very strange that he's like out there and he's like, well, it was basically like an aw shucks reaction, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was odd. It was not what I would have expected. definitely.
You mentioned the little fight interlude because he came out in the end of break, so you're standing there for whatever the 2:30, 3:30, whatever the ad break is. I do like the touch that during that ad break he thanks all the cameramen and the people at ringside and all the people that don't get shout outs on wrestling shows. And I think that's a nice classy touch, Codester.
Shout out guys with the leaf blowers, which wasn't quite sure why were they blowing away confetti or something, I guess.
Confetti or sweat, maybe. If can you blow away sweat with a leaf blower? I don't know.
They had 2 people out there with leaf blowers. Like, I did not realize that was a part of a wrestling show. But the more you know, that's the power of getting to watch through the ad breaks, I guess.
That's what my $5 on Fight pays for. As you said, Cody was interrupted by Jake the Snake Roberts making his All Elite Wrestling debut. Jake comes out. He calls Cody a bitch. He said, I didn't think you'd cry like a bitch. He said bitch twice, which I approve of. He said Cody got his ass kicked and he's bringing his own client to AEW and the dark side will be unleashed, which when he said the dark side, like, my heart skipped a beat because I thought he was going to say like the Dark Order, and like, Jake Roberts, probably a pretty good Exalted one if he wanted to reveal him as the Exalted one, but I assume that's not the case. Now he spent 20 years getting sober. He's here, and he always says never turn your back on somebody you respect or you fear. And then he turned his back, threw the microphone over his shoulder on like Mr. Perfect towel throwing levels. Cody caught it. He walked away. This is a great promo from Jake Roberts.
I loved it. There was a lot of that throwing energy alongside the QT apple throw. Like that, a lot of throwing energy on this episode. Very much enjoyed. Very satisfying to watch. But yeah, this was a great promo, and I mean, it's no secret that Jake Roberts is an incredible promo, but he hasn't missed a step. They had that for the Women's Battle Royal a few pay-per-views ago, where he was kind of doing the intro where he was smoking, and people got very mad about him smoking for some reason. He was awesome there, and he has just carried that into this. He is going to be an incredible manager, and yeah, they did a really good. What I sense is that this is probably going to be like a diversion for Cody, and that he'll probably end up at the next pay-per-view up against MJF in some fashion, whether it's like a War Games or something like that. But they want to kind of have a diversion in the meantime for him, and this was the perfect way to set it up.
And it looks like they're sending MJF perhaps into a mini program with Jon Moxley. So they branch those two off, and then probably, as you said, bring them back together for some kind of stipulation blow-off come, if it's as far as Double or Nothing, or maybe earlier. Double or Nothing is only 2 months away at this stage, so it's probably Double or Nothing.
Which is good. One thing I've really enjoyed about AEW is that when people are feuding with people, other people on the roster still exist in their life, and that doesn't happen nearly enough in WWE for a start, or really most American wrestling promotions. It's like the one guy you're feuding with is the only person in your universe during the course of your feud, whereas they've done a good job of like weaving things in and out, and having another 2 months of MGF promos antagonizing Cody wouldn't work brilliantly. Maybe it maybe would get a little stale. So having this diversion, having Jake come out, it worked. Do you have any feel for who his his client might be? I'm thinking maybe Archer.
The two clear candidates, I'd imagine, are either Brody Lee or Lance Archer. I'm leaning Lance Archer because Lance Archer was meant to debut on this episode of Dynamite, and he did not, which tells me they held him back to do a big reveal next week. Oh, he's Jake Roberts' client, and he's killing Cody. And I think Lance Archer needs someone to talk to him more than Brody Lee does.
Yeah. The amount of big guys who have debuted attacking Cody is amusing at this point. I was
going to say, butchering the blade, and just like, mean.
Like Wardlow, etc. But like it's a formula that's worked, so
he's the biggest babyface in the company. People will get over jumping him, and it works every time.
Yeah,
I guess unless you're the Butcher and the Blade, in which you're back to being a lower card tag team the second you're done with them.
Yeah, how far can you push Pepper Parks?
Hey, you leave Braxton Sutter alone. Pac defeated Chuck Taylor in, frankly, kind of a disappointing match. It was a 10-minute match, so you wouldn't expect the world from them, but I still expected something a little more than like a perfectly good, fine, completely, utterly forgettable television match.
Yeah, it was weird. Like, I watched this match and was like, yeah, that was fine, and like, Pac looked good, in that Pac always looks good in whatever he does. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's kind of all you can expect from a short match like that. And then I looked at the time and was like, oh, they didn't really make much use of that time, did they? But yeah, the one big takeaway from me from this that stuck in the mind was JR burying Chuck Taylor's body. He was like, yeah, he's got a really big frame and he does nothing with it. Like, he could be a really good wrestler if he just put on some muscle, you know? And I was like, JR, come on. Come on. You're not meant to bury the good guys. Come on.
That's it. JR. I find JR, like, I was watching a 2007 episode of Raw, and it was a John Cena, Chris Benoit main event of all things. But he was, like, so enthusiastic, and so he was still, even in 2007, JR. He was still JR, and now you watch him, and he's just like, not only is he not a great announcer, he's forgotten what he's there for. He's not there to, like, pass comments on Chuck Taylor's body. He's there to get Chuck Taylor over. Like, what's he doing? He's forgotten the fundamental job that him as the play-by-play announcer is meant to be there doing. It's supposed to be getting these people over and explaining what they're doing and protecting them, and if they screw up, covering for them instead of exposing them. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Where did the JR that cared go?
The thing with him for me is that it's made to look so much worse by Tony Schiavone just showing up after not doing wrestling for ages and being excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's what the old guy who maybe isn't super in touch with modern wrestling, but does put over the product, that's what that looks like. And it's juxtaposed right next to a guy who's there, and every time he sees something he doesn't like, he just goes, you know what, I'm going to say I don't like this, despite me being the voice of the product. And it's like, come on. Like, and in all honesty, when stuff is good, JR isn't generally that bad, I've found recently anyway. Like, I didn't have much of a problem with him during the big tag at Revolution. I know some people had a little bit of a problem with him, be like, you got to get out of the ring, or whatever. But overall, I thought it was quite good for that. For the Cody stuff, he's obviously good. But that's almost the bit that it's easy to be a good announcer for. Putting over something that's great is easy. The hard part of your job is to put over the stuff that's mediocre, and he does a terrible job at that.
I think testament to Tony. At Revolution, Excalibur said that maybe Pac against Kenny Omega was maybe the best match to ever air on TNT. And Tony was like, you know what, I think you're right. And, like, part of me thinks, like, part of JR's brain is like, no, it was Jushin Liger against Brian Pillman on Nitro. It's like, no, Tony's like, yeah, it was. And it probably is. It better than any WCW Monday Nitro match? There's a good chance that Iron Man match was better than any WCW Monday Nitro match. But, yeah, it's like, he just puts stuff over. He's there to have a good time, say everything is great, and put stuff over. And JR's, I'm so sick of him. I'm like, ugh. What happened to you, man? What happened to you? What happened that made you think, I'm not there to protect these people anymore?
My guess would be doing his time at, like, what was his title? Like, talent relations or something? Like, that kind of clouded things, because in that role he is there to kind of point out the faults and try and make things better from the back end, but that's not something you do on air, is it? Like, anyway, this segment, it was fine. It was all about the follow-up, really.
Indeed. After the match, Pac and the Lucha Bros attacked and laid out all three best friends and announced themselves as Death Triangle. I love Death Triangle. It's such a dumb name.
I loved him. I know I attempt to do the Spanish because, one, I can't fully remember it, and two, I don't speak Spanish, so my accent would be horrible. But him going, my amigos would say, and then just handing the microphone to them. It's like, that's wonderful, corny stuff, and it just worked, man. What I really liked about this is I'm so impressed by that they found the perfect level for Orange Cassidy. Mm-hmm. I kind of get the impression he wasn't initially meant to be featured this much, but obviously he got super over, so they're pushing him, but they've managed to push him in the right way, because Orange Cassidy is a character, and, you know, maybe some people will disagree, but I don't think it's a character you can push all the way up the card. I don't really think he could probably even really be in huge semi-mains or something like that. But he can be featured, and they found, like, the perfect amount to feature him. They featured him to the maximum where it still works for his character. that fits his overness level, which is very.
But also, he made his debut in the semi-main event of a pay-per-view, which is like...
Yes, but...
It's wild that, like, his singles debut was the semi-main event of a big pay-per-view against Pac, and it was probably the second best match on the show.
Right, but, like, it was the semi-main event, but it wasn't the number 2 match.
No,
it was probably 4th or 5th or something like that. Which is where you want him, really.
They've only given you the perfect concentrated shots of orange. They're not the dilute. They haven't diluted the orange juice. It's just the perfect concentration.
It's not squash.
Jake Hager defeated QT Marshall in a match that I thought, like, it was only 3 minutes, I think, give or take. But QT Marshall got way too much in on Jake Hager.
When did QT Marshall become this weird high flyer guy?
It's been his entire AEW thing where he does terrible looking flips, and it is admittedly very charming.
It's so strange because he was a guy who, like... So, in a life past, I was like a big Ring of Honor guy. That's kind of where I started my internet wrestling fandom, over on the ROHworld.com or whatever it was. QT Marshall was a guy who came in and the locker room made fun of him for how boring a wrestler he was, because he was like the big old school guy who never left his feet, only did headlocks, that sort of thing. Fans hated him. There was a big... They had a Night of Hoopla show where, like, one of the things they were advertising was that QT Marshall wasn't booked.
That's so mean.
And they did this little segment where, like, he was in on the segment, but the segment was that he wouldn't be there, and he wasn't there, and that was kind of the draw, which was something. And then, like, he kind of disappears for 5, 6, 7 years or something, and then shows up in AEW as a guy who's probably, like, still one of the biggest guys on the roster, and he's this weird bad flippy guy. Like, how's that happen? What a weird trajectory. Yeah, the match was weird. A lot of, like, a fair bit of Hager's stuff looked good, but I do agree that he took too much offense from QT. Like, you wanted him to kind of continue to get over as a monster, and he was dominant-ish, but, like, he should have looked more dominant. I agree.
The extent of QT's hope spot should have been, like, a few punches. Like, I think he got a near fall off him at one stage with a senton, and then I'm like, what are we doing? Why is QT Marshall getting a near fall on Jake Hager? What are we doing there? Come on.
Yeah, and again, this match was mostly just to set up the post-match angle yet again.
In which we had a giant brawl as all the members of the Inner Circle spilled out, and not all the members of the Elite, Nick Jackson and Kenny Omega weren't there, suffering from the effects. As all the Elite and all of the Inner Circle come out, Inner Circle gets the upper hand until everyone's favourite Hangman Page strolls out casually, holding a drink, fully dressed, walks into the ring, looks at the Inner Circle, thinks about it for a second. The Inner Circle go back to continuing to beat up the Elite. Hangman puts his drink on the post, turns around, beats up the Inner Circle, hits a really damn good buckshot lariat on Jake Hager. If Jake Hager gave too much to QT Marshall, he fed for that buckshot lariat so damn well. Hangman gets his drink, drinks his drink, gives Matt Jackson the middle finger, and then leaves. What a Hangman Page is the best character on this television show, and it's not even close.
See, look, I'm going to be grumpy here. I thought this was a little too cartoonish for my liking. Like, it got over, so I can't really criticize it too much, but, like, there's levels of hamming, and, like, the wandering down to the ring in slow motion, putting his drink on the side, like, what's going on here? Very, very cartoonish. It wasn't for me, this bit, but as you said, the buckshot lariat looked awesome. And a part of why I was kind of disappointed is that I do love Adam Page so much, and that I think the good stuff that they're doing with him is excellent. But for me, this was like a little too cartoonish for which I realise is, you know, AEW as a show has the cartoonish bend, but it didn't quite connect with me in the way. This felt like a more of a mid-card thing than an upper-card thing, I guess.
I think the reason I liked it is because like him walking out there both works on a story level as well as just being a little silly, because he doesn't like these people. It's well established he really doesn't like these people, and he helps them because he's like loosely associated friends with them, and it's probably what he should do, but he's not going to do it quickly, and of course not at the expense of his drink, which is understandable, though I don't drink, so clearly I don't relate, but still.
This is kind of a general observation from stuff I've been watching, but Ortiz's timing's really bad for feeding for spots, like, which is weird because he's very good at pretty much everything else, but like he's always super early to like turn around for stuff and get in position, and it just bugs me. Minor thing.
I think I've noticed that more in AEW. I don't think that ever clicked with me in his Impact stuff, and maybe it might just be the way these angles are blocked. Because they've done angles like this a lot, where like each member of the stable comes out and they get beaten down, and someone else comes out and gets beaten down, and then someone makes the eventual save, and like that does require blocking and timing, and sometimes it's on the kind of on the clumsy side, where somebody makes a save and it's not the best looking in the world, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not a huge thing. It's just something I'd noticed, and I'd noticed it before, and it was like, it's weird for someone who is a very good wrestler to not quite have the timing down for these sorts of things, especially in segments more than matches, really. But yeah.
Next week, speaking of Ortiz, he will face Cody, 1-on-1. He had no singles matches in Impact, and he's already had 2 in AEW. Death Triangle will be in action. It was announced they'll be facing Joey Janela and Private Party since. MJF, the Butcher and the Blade will face the Jurassic Express, so 2 6-man tag team matches next week, plus the rules for Blood and Guts, which is AEW's War Games, which will take place on the last Dynamite of March, I want to say. Yes, the 25th, which is the last Dynamite of March, will have their version of War Games, which, based on the prior segment, I can only imagine is the Elite against the Inner Circle, but we'll see.
You'd think so. Yeah, I like how they've slowly been organising more and more people into like groups or loosely associated alliances and that sort of thing, because it's just nice that like people have friends, and that when they're then in matches that are tag matches, they have a natural partner, or they have guys to team with, or they have guys to second for them. I like that in general, and they've slowly been grouping more and more people together.
They definitely need trios belts at this stage, don't they?
Maybe. It might be a little too crowded. Like, I think you could do trio belts, but I kind of get the sense that a TV title isn't a million miles away. And would you want, on a 2-hour show, 4 belts? Or would that make it 5? Tag
Women World, and then TV and another one would make it 5.
Yeah, I think that might be a little too crowded. But then again, they are adding an extra show at some point, aren't they? So who knows? But yeah, I enjoy trios matches, and it seems that going forward we're going to have more and more of them, so cool.
And I think a more pressing concern for the show, I think what would get more people on the show doing something more interesting would be trios belts more than a TV title. I think trios belts would be, if you were to say introduce trios belts next or a TV title next, I'd say trios belts first, because that gives all of these trios something to do when they're not doing single stuff. Sure.
Good argument.
Though equally, I don't think any trios belt in the history of trios belts has ever been anything but a side attraction. So that might not help.
Yeah, I kind of like trios as a thing to kind of build up tags and singles. That's kind of my preferred method. Like, going back to 90s All Japan or something, there was, to my knowledge anyway, off the top of my head, no trios titles. Yet the amount of amazing multi-mans that they main evented with and were incredible, almost countless, but they weren't built around the actual trios belts. It was kind of the setups, so that you weren't burning off the singles matches and the 2v2 tags. You'd have great 8-mans or great 6-mans, and then on the bigger shows you got the singles matches, you got the tag matches. So that would be the way I'd, in an ideal world, do it. And that's kind of what they've been doing, to be fair.
You don't want to see the New Japan trios belts, which I think still in the Ring of Honor have them too, don't they?
They do. Ring of Honor actually kind of use them, and they don't use them that horribly, but I think there was a point where the New Japan ones hadn't been defended in 6 months or something, which was the old if you don't care, why should we? Well, that's an extreme example of that one.
Ghetto doesn't care about his tag teams, never mind his trios.
He seems to be caring a little bit more now, maybe.
We'll see. This isn't the New Japan cast, though. There's plenty of... Though New Japan is currently gone forever, so realistically, there is no New Japan cast.
Currently gone forever.
For however long coronavirus lasts. Actually, like, my local hospital has like 60 doctors and nurses put into like quarantine because they had somebody had coronavirus and left them on a bed for like 2 days. They were showing symptoms and they just left them there in public. They didn't quarantine them. It's like, that's not good.
That does sound like what you want to do. Like, I don't pretend to be an expert on this, but it doesn't sound smart.
In a hospital with 3,000 staff and a bunch of sick patients, let's let the guy showing symptoms just wander the halls.
Just high-fiving people as he goes past.
Oh dear. Jon Moxley was attacked by the Inner Circle before the tag team main event, so the tag team main event was mostly Darby Allin versus... entirely Darby Allin against Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara in what was technically a tag team match, but in effect a handicap match in which Jericho and Guevara won. And realistically, I don't think this was a great match, but this was a tremendous performance from Darby Allin. Another in, I think, a long series of really great performances from Darby Allin.
He is so good. Like, it's incredible that a guy who basically almost always does the same thing every time it's incredible. Like, you'd think it would almost get boring watching him sell and make a comeback, but god damn, he's so good at it, and he's so reckless, and he's so rootable for that. This was just... I agree, I couldn't really call it a great match, but it was a great segment, and Guevara and Jericho were brilliant in their roles too. They gave just enough that it was compelling throughout. It'd be easy for this to end up being boring, just because I can't remember how long this match was, but it was pretty much, for the majority, it was one guy selling against two guys, getting a few hope spots. It would be easy to make that boring, but it was consistently compelling throughout. And that's not easy to do, and they absolutely managed to succeed. And the thing I really liked about this, and it's the obvious comparison to WWE, what would happen with WWE is that Moxley would come back, get the hot tag and win the match, and it would suck because you still had that's still basically it's two 2-on-1s after each other, and yet you're basically burying the heels in that they've had all that chance to beat down Allin, and then they'd have a chance 2-on-1 against Moxley and they'd lose. But in this, they did it slightly different. They had the bad guys just win because there was two of them and there was one opponent, so they should win. And it just worked. And then you still had the Moxley at the end come out, be valiant, only to then get destroyed off a stage. But it was so much more effective than the typical WWE thing that you'd get where the valiant guy who got beat down would fight back and just come back and win.
Comparisons to Jeff Hardy, I think, are a tad lazy, and JR wants you to think about it every time he comes out, because he's like, this mysterious enigma, Darby Allin. But Darby is really like Jeff Hardy tier babyface in peril. Like, you feel it. You feel everything that he's hit with, and you connect with it. And as you said, there's nothing particularly new about all of his matches. He makes his comeback, he hits a insane-looking suicide dive, which in an era where I think bad-looking suicide dives are a bit of an epidemic, the flying hugs, if you will. To see someone like him or Phoenix commit to it, it's like, yes, this is how it should be.
Yes, there's a level of force behind it that, like, you kind of, like, get to the point where you're like, I don't know, suicide dives don't really affect me anymore. Like, I don't get hyped for them. And then you see a good one, you're like, oh no, they do. It's just I've been seeing people kind of push people going through the ropes, and it's not good. And then you see, like, yeah, as you say, Phoenix or Allin just launch their bodies as fast as they can. You're like, yes, that's what I want. That's what it is. And
then he hits a stunner, he hits coffin drops, and like there's nothing new there. But as you said, it works. because he's so compelling. He's just, you connect with him. You connect with him on a level that you don't connect with other people, and he feels indestructible, which is bizarre because he's a tiny human being. And it's Darby Allin, and it's his record in AEW is 7-8-1. He has lost more matches than he's won, and like his matches that he's lost are more memorable, like this handicap match, or like his match against Chris Jericho, or his match against Pac, or his match against Jon Moxley. Like all the matches that Darby Allin has lost are more memorable than the ones he's won, because those are the performances that he stands out in. It's they've done a really remarkable job. That Darby Allin is probably the breakout star of the show so far, and he's lost more matches than he's won,
which usually would be an indictment, but that's perfect for what this is. This is like, his character needs to lose more. He is perfect. He is perfect as booked as like a guy who's just not quite on the level of the main eventers, but damn is he going to put in an effort and almost beat them and almost pull the upset. And every now and again he'll get to pull the upset, but the more you do it, the less effective it will be, I think. So they've done an excellent job of getting him over without burning those big wins yet.
Yeah, when he does beat Chris Jericho or Jon Moxley or Pac, it will be a big deal.
It'll be a huge deal, definitely.
Yeah, as you said, post-match, Mox comes back, he runs wild before he's eventually cut off and powerbombed through off the stage. So I thought they'd debut somebody here, like a Lance Hoyt, or Lance Archer, or a Brody Lee, or anybody. But no, the Inner Circle just beat him up. And then they did the Shield fists in thing, but with middle fingers, and that was very good, I approve.
Yeah, I enjoy that. Overall, with the whole segment of like Jericho kind of teasing at the beginning of the show, you know, if they didn't like completely outline it fully, but it was basically if he lost, or if Moxley walked out or something, he would be gone for 60 days. I really liked that, because there were those little rumours of like, oh, maybe Jericho wants to go tour with Fozzy for a bit, so after losing the title he's going to go for a little break, or it would be an easy way to kind of spin Moxley away from the Inner Circle. So there was a real thought of like, yeah, maybe Moxley wins this match. Maybe they do the WWE thing of the guy gets beaten down pre-match, comes out midway through the match, gets the hot tag, wins the match, and Jericho's out of here for 60 days, and that's kind of the clean transition away from those two, and they can both do different things after Jericho comes back. But no, they kind of doubled down and went in the increased the feud basically, and it having that kind of in your mind of like, oh, maybe this is the end of the Inner Circle Moxley stuff, and this is how they're going to kind of separate them, and then they don't go that way. I enjoy stuff like that.
It's good swerves.
Yes, yeah. Good swerves are when stuff makes sense on both directions, and they make it look like it's going to go one way and they go the other way, instead of one thing makes sense, so they do the thing that doesn't make sense.
God, wrestling's so dumb.
Yeah, I worked you, because the thing didn't make sense happened, and you didn't expect it. Yeah!
I wrote something incomprehensible, and you didn't comprehend it, you idiot.
Yeah, and as you say, this wasn't like a great match, but it's something that you'll remember as kind of an entire package.
When Darby Allin someday does in fact win the AEW Championship, which I think will happen, I hope will happen, I think this is one of the matches to go back to. I was like, oh, one of those early matches where it's like, oh, this is where you clearly look at this man and he's a gigantic star. Yeah,
it's hard to project out, but like in my mind, he'd be perfect for like a 1 day or 1 week reign or something.
I'd go one pay-per-view cycle. I hate reigns that short, but yes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's probably better. That's probably me with too much of a WWE brain on.
It's all the title reigns that last short times only have to last a day or a week, because that's Vince's attention span. So that's AEW, which I thought a good show, not great. A clear step down from the recent like real home run episodes of Dynamite. But this was more like a post-pay-per-view. We're resetting the table. We're rejumbling up programs as Cody moves into something else, as we set up Death Triangle, and as we probably build towards another title match between Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho on Dynamite sometime in the next couple of weeks. It felt more like a table-setting Dynamite. Just resetting the table, jumbling the pieces back around, and start building their stories up once again.
I think post-big event shows are often quite tricky to do, because almost the easy thing to do is kind of pretend like for them to completely not reference the stuff that's just happened and then go straight into the next stuff. But then you don't get the interconnected flow of your product that you really want. But what you don't want to do is not move anything on from the pay-per-view. You want a sense of finality from some of the pay-per-view stuff. And overall, I thought they did a very good job in that pretty much everyone referenced what happened on the pay-per-view, and they weren't like, well, I lost a match, and I don't care about what happened now. Like, straight away, something new. But they did a good mix of moving people into new programs, keeping some programs going, that sort of thing. It felt like a new chapter of the story rather than a completely new story, which is what I prefer in wrestling, rather than a complete pay-per-view cycle reset where it's like, well, you know, the classic WWE, well, it's a new 30-day cycle. Everything that just happened doesn't matter anymore. It's whoever I'm feuding with now that's the only thing that matters. And I'll be friends with a person who I hated 6 days ago or whatever. You did miss, though, a very weird MJF promo.
Oh, I did. I skipped over that, yes.
Where the camera seemed to be out of focus for half of it. That was weird.
Yeah.
Or was that just... That wasn't just my screen, right?
I'll be honest, it didn't click with me. I didn't even notice, but yeah.
Yeah, they kind of did the I pinned Cody shirt thing, which was... Oh, God. Was it I broke... Wahoo's leg or something? I'm not a territory fan, so I don't know the exact reference, but it's aping off something from the territories.
It's the latest in MJF's baby's first heel act.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a good talker, but like, I'm not really that invested in anything he does. Like, Cody is the guy getting me invested in that feud.
Because Cody is the true ace of the world.
He's very good. He's a very good wrestler.
On the subject of ace of my heart, that's not a good segue because we're talking about WWE NXT.
Yes, Triple H.
Yeah, the true ace of the World Wrestling Federation, Triple H, and his wonderful show from Full Sail University, which Steel Cage Night, not quite lockdown, only 2 matches of the 5 in the Steel Cage, so not quite full lockdown. But NXT opened with a steel cage match between Tegan Nox and Dakota Kai in a match that I thought was actually really good. But I hate escape the cage matches, and there was 2 instances in this match where I was actively bad at escape the cage matches. There was one where Tegan Nox hit her Shining Wizard, and I was like, just walk out the door, because she went for the pin, Dakota Kai kicked out, and then she sat there holding her face in her hands for like 90 seconds, shocked. It's like, just walk out the door. You can just walk out the door and you win. You don't have to pin her. You can beat her by walking out the door. And then at the end of the match, where Tegan Nox was holding onto the cage and Raquel Gonzalez was just kind of wandering around, distracting her side, I'm just like, just let go of the cage. You can fall. Just let go of the cage. You'll win. Just let go of the cage. And yeah, I hate escape the cage matches. I think they're the dumbest thing in the history of wrestling. And I really hate that they keep doing them because they make absolutely no sense. And there's just the logic. And if they locked the door, it would be one thing and you had to climb out. At least then there's like a physical task involved and you can create some drama about that. But like, just walk out the door. There's at least like 4 instances in every escape the cage match where someone can walk out a door and doesn't, and it just makes me mad. And realistically, you don't want to escape the cage matches. This is a big grudge rivalry between Tegan Nox and Dakota Kai. The idea is that they're going to rip each other to shreds. You don't want someone to win by climbing out. It's not a climbing contest. And also, the idea of the cage match is that nobody interferes, and both the cage matches on this show had people interfering, and it's stupid. Rob, save me from my cage match rants.
God, why did you bring me on for the cage match episode?
I don't know. Because
it's like my least favourite it's not quite my least favourite stipulation. I hate I quit matches maybe a little bit more, but they're up there in the pantheon. And like WWE is the absolute worst at them. As you say, lock the door and then it kind of works. Maybe it's not the most entertaining thing, but there's a level of making sense that just is completely absent. Just taking the normal amount of selling for normal moves. An escape the cage match where you can just walk through the door should be over in like a minute. Because in pretty much every normal match, someone's on the ground and selling for a little bit. within about a minute usually. A biggish move has been hit, and then you can just wander out the door. Like, for some reason, during cage matches, people really struggle to get between the ropes to get out the cage, whereas in a normal match, they no trouble at all. And what destroys my brain, because obviously you shouldn't think about it, because they don't think about it, so why should you? But why do they lock the door if when you walk over to it, they open it for you?
It's to keep Raquel Gonzalez out, of course, because that worked so well.
It's not like it's locked.
No.
It's just like with a bolt that goes up. Like, if Raquel Gonzalez walked over, she could undo the bolt as well. What's the point of them locking the door and then unlocking the door every time someone wants to go through?
I don't know. I hate this. I hate these matches. They're so stupid.
And as you said, the thing is, they worked really hard in this match. They had a hard-hitting match, and I didn't enjoy it because I couldn't get past the massive logic holes that it just took me out of it so much. Like, there's one moment in this match where I think Raquel Gonzalez is at the door, who's fighting with Tegan Nox, but I think the door's shut, and she's kind of blocking the door from being opened, and then Dakota Kai runs up and goes to boot Tegan, but Tegan moves, and she boots the door into Raquel Gonzalez, and she goes crashing out onto the floor. Dakota looks shocked for a little bit, then turns around and gets onto her knees so she can take a Shining Wizard. She just booted a door. Why is she then waited for 30 seconds, turned around, and then knelt down? What's going on here? Like, and then the finish was kind of inventive, but like, it kind of just further showcased how dumb the stipulation is, in that, like, why did Tegan bother climbing all the way up when the easier thing, demonstrated because one person at that point couldn't walk, but managed to just walk out, kind of crawl out the door. Why did she not just go out the door, Garrett?
I hate them so much, Rob.
It's like no one thinks about, in that company, thinks about the matches for like a second. The least you can expect from a piece of media is to make some level of internal sense. Like, I can go watch like fantasy shows like Magic and shit, but like, as long as it makes sense within its own universe, fine. This doesn't make any level of sense. Like, it creates plot holes every 30 seconds. What? I hate it. I hate it so much. And as you said, it's so much worse because these people in these, like these two in this match, worked really hard, did some inventive stuff, took some, dives off the top of cages onto each other, big spots, probably didn't feel very good the following morning. And I'm not thinking about the wrestling at all. I'm thinking about the structure of the match because it's inherently flawed to a degree that they couldn't have really done anything to make it okay. Because of that damn door!
They also had a what I thought would have been a much better finish, where it didn't actually end up being the finish in the end, but Tegan Nox was climbing down the cage, and then she kicked the cage door into the knee of Dakota Kai, and I'm like, that's actually like an incredibly satisfying finish to this feud, which started with the penalty, or the kind of holding box War Games cage, having that door slammed on her knee, and it's like, oh, that's actually no, wait, the Raquel Gonzalez was interfering, that's not actually the finish, that's not the cathartic justice that they were setting up, it was just it's like, that would have been such a better finish to this match. Yeah, that was. What can you say? What can you say? Like, they worked so hard. Like none of this is on Tegan Nox and Dakota Kai, because they worked so hard in this match. They don't pick how the match works. Like they can't influence the door opening when you walk near it, or like. Although the cannonball does look really dumb and continues to look really dumb. And I think Tegan Nox's chokeslam isn't great, but for someone who does a chokeslam as a Kane tribute, it's not a great choke. Also, the way they filmed the dive off the cage the first time was like, if you tried to film it in a way that made it look as unimpressive as possible, that's how you do it. Because they filmed their top and then filmed it from behind, and they basically didn't catch any of the actual falling from a 12-foot structure, or however tall that cage actually is. 12 feet feels about right. And yeah, don't film. Take wide shots when people dive off cages. For the love of God, it's not that hard.
It's one of those things where, like, in another era or a different company, like, diving off a cage is like a big moment that gets referenced a lot. You won't think about this again 2 weeks from now.
In contrast to the Cody dive off the cage, the moonsault off the cage, which I think will become an kind of iconic AEW moment for years and years to come.
Definitely.
Finn Balor's given out about Walter. His hand has been forced.
He doesn't really work as a tough guy, does he?
He doesn't. I don't like NXT Finn Balor at all. It just, everything he says, I'm just like, this is stupid. Why don't you just be the cool guy who makes people horny on Instagram and has decent matches? That's all I want out of Finn Balor.
He feels like he's kind of trying to do like a darkish, brooding, tough guy who's a step ahead of you and you should be afraid of. Like, you can't really be afraid of Finn Balor. It just doesn't work. Like, that's not his aura at all. Like, his character is that you should be afraid of him coming out and beating you up, and like that's not him. That's just not you, Finn. That's just not you.
No, he's too much. He's too much of a nice man.
Like, you can't be that guy and the guy who plays with Legos. Like, come on.
There's a cognitive dissonance there.
Like, it's on this show that you've had like featured you playing with Legos. Like, you can't then be the tough broody guy. Come on now.
I assume that's either a WrestleMania weekend match or an NXT UK Takeover Dublin match, which is still a very unfortunate name. UK Takeover Dublin. Come on. But yeah, whenever that happens, sure.
In some ways, it's appropriate. It would be a takeover if it was the UK, but it's a very WWE thing to do. But, you know.
Classic imperialist Brit defending the takeovers of the Irish.
Hey. If there's one thing I will never defend, it's NXT UK. You cannot tar me with that brush. You cannot tar me with that brush. And NXT UK and me are mortal enemies.
Oh dear. Rhea Ripley visited the stadium of WrestleMania, talked about how she was going to win. I don't know, this is a nice little personality piece.
It was nice, and like I think in general there's not enough of these things in wrestling, but like I didn't think it was particularly like excellently done or anything. Like, she seemed amazed by seats. She was like, wow, I've never seen this many seats. Okay. Like, sure.
It's a big
I get that it's a big thing for her, but like it just felt like a bit inauthentic. It felt very scripted, and maybe it wasn't even scripted, but that's how it came off. It's like, who gets it? It's like, wow, there's a lot of seats.
Gee golly whiz, yes. The grandeur and spectacle of WrestleMania.
In Australia, we don't have this many seats. Like, okay. And she said that line about like how she'd coming into WWE, she'd always got compared to Charlotte. Like, she was an obvious comparison to Charlotte. Was she?
I don't remember anybody ever doing that, no.
Was that mini Charlotte? No, I don't think so. No, not really. Like, she is... I guess the comparison would be that they're probably fairly similarly sized.
And they're the faces of their respective brands, I guess. But
she was kind of like making it seem like it's something that's all the way through her coming up. She was referred to... Yeah. It felt a bit forced, but, you know, whatever.
Also, I don't think Rhea Ripley is the person to be like, look how relatable she is. She's like a badass. I don't get, like, it's ever since she's won the title, they've done things like she has to cut the babyface in the ring promos, and they do this relatable, you know, grounded down to earth interview. Look how in awe she is at her big WrestleMania moment. It's like, no, she's Rhea Ripley. She's a badass. She goes out there, this is my brutality, and she beats people up.
Like, there's a lot of women over the years that they've had in WWE that can do, like, the every woman role. That's not the one you should pick. Ripley's the cool person who, like, you aspire to be, but you're not the person that, like, oh yes, we can all relate to her. Shotzi Blackheart's tank entrance, I had never seen that before.
Oh.
That is impressively dorky.
I'm a big fan of mini tanks. Mini anything. And turn anything into a miniature version of its usual thing, and it's much better. Coming out of a mini tank, wearing your helmet. There's actually, the first week she did it, if you remember, Sammy Guevara at the Royal Rumble started going around in a mini tank. And the week after that, she debuted on NXT. I was like, is that a shot at Sammy? But no, apparently she does the mini tank thing on the indies too. So Shotzi loves her tanks.
It's just such like a weird, elaborate entrance for a jobber. It was like, and it just came out of nowhere with like, and because I'd never seen it before, it just kind of, someone's flying down the ring and like the camera's weirdly low. Oh, okay, quick tank. Oh, she's screaming. Oh, she's kind of doing the splits on the floor. Okay, and now out comes her opponent and beats her in a minute. Okay, that happened. Sure, whatever.
These are the things you experience when you don't watch NXT every week. You miss the tanks. Oh, we have a Mauro quote from the opening match that needs to be read. I forgot about that. The most important thing on this show, Mauro Ranallo. Where did I save this Mauro quote? I think I emailed it to myself. This is what I do. This is my life. Where can I keep myself the Mauro Ranallo quotes? All right. I have to. There's two of them. Okay. And Dakota Kai, meanwhile, she is transmogrified to Dark Kota Kai, and as she would rather be called, King Kota. Then Nigel McGuinness interrupts her, talks for a moment. Mauro comes back around, and Kai, along with Gonzalez, proving to be more venomous than a king cobra. Dark Kota Kai. And in typical Mauro fashion, he had one that I had to actually look up. And Kai goes down harder than Oprah during the 2020 Vision Tour. Apparently Oprah fell over during one of her live shows recently. I was like, that's a little mean, isn't it, Mauro?
Wow. Yeah. Watching a full NXT show reminded me why I don't watch full NXT shows. And it's not all because of Mauro, but it's a significant part because of Mauro. Like, he's one of those people that, like, he's a lot. He's a lot. He's far too much. Whew.
I think that's the tone of NXT in general. It's just a lot. Like, the theme song is this big in-your-face song, and over all of like the segments and like the announcer on cameras, they play the theme song in the background. So it's like, I don't even know how it goes, but it's just, yeah, the show is just it's breathless and loud. And I think if it were allowed to breathe more and maybe take it down a few decibels, it would be a better show. Yeah, Chelsea Green beat Shotzi Blackheart. She advances to the ladder match at TakeOver. I'm still mad that that's a ladder match for no reason, but let's move on. Nothing about the match. Though Chelsea Green calls her unprettier the I'm prettier, which I guess is solid wordplay.
Yeah, I thought that was like fairly clever. This was another short women's match, much like the AEW one, that had an impressive amount of awkward stutter steps for such a short match. So, you know, you've got that consistency across the two brands.
Yeah, you gotta keep your squashes as clumsy and messy as possible. That's the way they get over, right?
Like, you had 2 minutes to fill, guys. Come on.
We get one of, I think, 2 teasers on the show for someone coming soon. It looks a lot like Killer Cross.
Gonna be honest, don't remember it. So
it's just like abstract images of deserts and clocks and things dying. Very Killer Cross, if you've seen any Killer Cross media through the years. Oh god, okay. Keith Lee comes out and sets your stopwatch because this is one of the first of many promos on the show, and I hate this about NXT. Keith Lee comes out to say nothing, and he's waiting. He's literally talking for 2 minutes to be interrupted by Cameron Grimes. There is no other function of Keith Lee coming out and speaking other than to be interrupted by Cameron Grimes. I hate that. I hate that so much. It's like, why did he go out there? What did he have to say? Why didn't he address what he had to say? He's talking about Damian Priest. He's talking about Dominic Dijakovic. He doesn't actually say anything, and then out comes Cameron Grimes to interrupt him, and then they actually get to the meat of the actual segment. And I'm just like, ugh. And we'll get into this more because I think it happened at least 3 other times on this wrestling show.
You made a tweet about this as I was watching the show, and it was literally a thing that was happening as I read the tweet. I was like, well, definitely not wrong. And it wasn't this time either. So, yeah, it's something that, you know, didn't strike me as hard because this was the first time it happened in the show, and, you know, I don't watch the show every week, so it didn't stick out as much. And I thought the actual overall segment that we'll kind of move on to was actually pretty effective. But now that you mention it, what was Keith actually saying before Grimes came out? Like,
Nothing.
It's
Nothing at
literally
all.
just stalling for time because they don't feel they can have him come out and be immediately interrupted. He needs to fill 2 minutes first.
You know what you do instead? Just have Cameron Grimes go out first. Have him go out and say, Keith Lee, I pinned Dijakovic, give me a title shot. Then Keith Lee comes out and you do the rest of the segment. And then it just makes so much more sense.
Look, we've established this isn't a show that's about making sense, so...
That's true. Yeah, Grimes brags to Keith Lee about defeating Dijakovic faster than Keith Lee could. And Keith Lee's like, so what? But like, yeah, he beat him faster than you. That's a perfectly valid brag. Before eventually, what's the name of that belt? North American. God damn it, I always nearly call that the US title belt. Leaving out poor Canada. It's the North American title match for
and
next
Mexico.
week. Is Mexico in North America? That's always a dodgy one for me, because this is North or Central America.
Well, Central America isn't usually considered a continent. I guess you've also maybe got the Caribbean in there as well.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Geography.
You don't get many South American titles, so it's not like it's distinctly split up, really.
It's unfair. There's a European belt. There's a UK belt. There will be a Japan belt.
It's coming, baby. It's coming.
Austin Theory was talking. What was he talking about? There's no way of knowing. He was talking waiting to be interrupted by Isaiah Scott, who challenged him to a match later that night.
He was busy calling himself the greatest ever, which the idea is that it's ridiculous, but it's like...
It goes so far past ridiculous that it's so uncredible that you don't even believe he'd say it.
It doesn't matter because, like, first off, nothing on this show matters. But as you say, everything's turned up a bit too loud. Like, just do like I'm the greatest, I'm the best wrestler currently on NXT or something like that. Like, I guess it sounds a lot less grand.
Fastest rising star.
He's meant to be cocky and he's meant to be overhyped and he's meant to like think he's better than he is. But it's like, I don't know. It was just like, what a weird choice. It doesn't matter.
Especially when his 2 matches on NXT so far are, well, not 2, he wrestled Joaquin Wilde as well. But his 2 big matches are losses to Tommaso Ciampa and Roderick Strong, so... It's not like he's even won a few matches before he's lost his most recent match against Tommaso Ciampa before he's calling himself the greatest in NXT. This is one of those stories that if you thought about it and said, alright, we'll have him beat Joaquin Wilde, we'll have him beat a Forgotten Son, we'll have him beat a couple of nerds, and then he starts calling himself the biggest star in NXT history because he's undefeated and he's defeated all these people, and then it kind of makes sense because he's undefeated. It makes sense that he says it, and then Isaiah Scott comes along and you beat all these nerds, why don't you wrestle me? And then you actually tell a real story. They do this all the time, where they just pretend the story they're telling is the story they told. And he's like, I'm the greatest in NXT, even though I lost to Tommaso Ciampa last week. Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I don't even remember. But recently he lost to Tommaso Ciampa. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like a credible thing he'd say. It's even like, as I said, it's beyond the level of ridiculous. That like, it's meant to be wrong, obviously. But at least it could have credibility in being wrong.
It's a weird thing. You want it to be obviously false, but also you want to believe that the person saying it believes it. And it's like, as you say, it's so far beyond that you can't believe that he believes it. But yeah, it's a minor thing on something with such bigger problems that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we've spent like 4 times as long on the length of this promo talking about this promo.
Going real Laps fan on it.
Undisputed Era defeated Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. I'm sure Oney Lorcan is very happy that he signed a new deal to go back right into his job to the Stars position. But it's an undisputed tag match against Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. It is exactly as fun as you'd expect it to be.
This was really good, and like watching this made me kind of it made me actually realise a few different things. First off, is that like I think Young Bucks are approaching the level where they're reasonable to call them. Like they're definitely in the discussion, and for some people would probably be the best tag team ever. But Red Dragon might be more talented than them. Like if I was like, who is the most talented tag team currently in the world? It might be Red Dragon. Like they do everything I want out of a tag team. They are incredible, and it's weird because like every takeover, pretty much, they get to have a great tag match, but they still feel wasted because they are like one of the, probably 5 best talented tag teams ever, and you get to see like 4 really great tag matches from them a year. But this was like, it was really good, but it also was meant as like, it wasn't wrestled like a takeover match, and they had that revival match a couple of, a month or so ago on NXT, and that kind of was wrestled a bit like a takeover match. Actually, that was more than a month.
I was about to say, that match was like last year. I think that was in the build-up to Survivor Series.
Yeah. What is time? But, that match was a match on regular NXT that was wrestled like a takeover match. This match wasn't. It was still really good, but it was wrestled in a way where the idea was Red Dragon are a lot better than these guys, and it got that over. And it's difficult to have a really good match where one team or one guy is presented as a lot better than the other team or guy, and they absolutely succeeded here.
It helps a lot. Like Logan and Birch, or Lorcan and the Birch, are like they're far too good as enhancement talent, that they always get used as enhancement talent because they're really, really good in that roles. And they should be doing so much more. But when you have them, it's like, well, if we have Undisputed Era wrestle Lorcan and Birch, they're going to have a great match and they're going to look better off because of it. So let's just leave Lorcan and Birch in that spot. It's a cruel world for those poor guys to be stuck in the tremendously good enhancement roles.
They're too good at making other people look better than them.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
You were saying about the Undisputed Era being wasted. I was looking at Kyle O'Reilly's singles matches in WWE, and he's been signed for going on 3 years now, and he's had 3 of them. And I'm like, this was like, he's every bit the wrestler all the other people in Undisputed Era. He's right there at Strong, maybe better than Strong.
I think he's better than Strong. I think Strong's excellent against the right person, but I think Kyle O'Reilly has more people that he is very good against. Like, if you stuck him in that feud with Velveteen Dream, I think he has better matches.
I think, he's Adam Cole's more popular than him, but if you let Kyle O'Reilly wrestle as Kyle O'Reilly on this show, he'd be one of the biggest stars. Like, it's annoying. He's feuding with the Broserweights at the moment. Let him have singles matches with Pete and Matt Riddle. Come on, what are you doing?
They've had great matches, singles matches before. Like, Kyle O'Reilly is so good. Like, he is going to be a guy that, like, 20 years from now, if people go back and watch matches from his career, they'll be like, this guy could have been, like, a top 5 Western wrestler ever. And, like, he's going to have a very, very good career full with great matches, but not quite the quantity of great matches that he should, and nowhere near the level of star that he perhaps could have been. Because he doesn't have that explosive charisma like Cole, but he has the kind of charisma that if you have him bobble under for long enough, he'll get there. Like a Daniel Bryan type deal.
Kushida's on the NXT roster. Just rerun the Best of the Super Junior final.
Like, and they have only ever had incredible matches. And I'm watching this match, like, it made me think, like, it's weird how, and it may just be the way Red Dragon wrestle and their kind of style, but NXT in general, everything is like, it's so much, everything is overly epic to like a fault. And the reason I love their tag division so much is it's the one division that isn't. They kind of just wrestle matches that are about the matches. They're not about great feeling and this guy betrayed me on this. It's like the story of the matches, well, halfway through we isolated this guy, targeted his knee, and his knee's a bit injured, so later in the match we take advantage of his knee being injured. And it's weird how, like, the tag division manages to exist like that within a company, within a promotion, within a brand in NXT that isn't about that sort of story at all in general. But the tag title matches are almost invariably that style, and as a result, the best things on the show. It's a weird kind of, like, it kind of sticks out in a weird way, but I love that it does.
I was watching Revolution, and one of my big, like, thoughts at the end of that show was how like every match on that show, even if the match wasn't good, like Jake Hager and Dustin Rhodes, on up, every match on that show was different. You know, they had different goals. You had the big epic tag match, you had the big hate-filled blood brawl, you had the old man lucha brawl in the main event. You know, every match on that, the Orange Cassidy wacky comedy, but actually secretly a great match. Every match on that show felt different. And you watch an NXT takeover, and most of the big matches on those shows don't feel different. They all feel the same, like big epic PWG 2012 style, which done really well is really darn good, but if it's done in every match, you become a little bit numb to it. And that's why I think Undisputed Era, and I think Shayna Baszler before she got moved up, that's why those people stand out, because those people wrestle a little differently than everyone else on the show, and it elevates their matches a great deal more because they just stand out a little more. They're a little bit different. You're not watching the same kind of match over and over and over again. When they actually wrestle, it's like, ooh, something a little different.
I'd argue Cole does wrestle the way the other guys do, but the Strong, O'Reilly and Fish, as you say, don't. They kind of wrestle a little bit more like, I'm going to make Nick Aldis mad, but a little bit more like Puro inspired, a little bit more sportish style, like the story is the match rather than the match is about the story. Like I've been theorizing about, like, I think about the theory of wrestling far more than like is healthy in any person, and like the structuring of matches, and over the time, like the way I model it these days is kind of, there's two genres of wrestling. There's many styles, but there's two genres. One is kind of a more sports-based genre in that the story is the match, and it's like, last time we fought, he took out my knee, and managed to submit me in a knee, so I'm going to be extra careful to not let him target my knee, but because of that I'm striking too much with my forearm, and he manages to get me in an arm lock, and he taps me out that way. And then there's the storytelling, which is like, this guy betrayed me, so I'm going to come on with so much more fire, and when I wrestle him towards the end, we used to be friends, so I'm going to be conflicted for a little bit, but then go, no, this guy did betray me and I'm going to beat him. And sometimes that storytelling style can be really good, but NXT is like the worst parts of the storytelling genre, and it is weird that you do get those occasional tag matches, usually with Red Dragon. Sorry, Undisputed Era. I'm showing my ROH bias there.
Your love of Davey Richards can never be contained.
Never. Just give me guys like suplexing people over the top rope all the time. It's what I live for, baby. Oh, what a bad main event that was. The final battle. Anyway, it is weird that they do kind of, in the midst of all this over-the-top epicness, they do kind of wrestle a more, as I say, the story is the match rather than the match being about the story. But I love them for it.
After the match, the Undisputed Era cut a promo, waiting to be interrupted by the Roserweights, who cut out and cut a promo, waiting to be interrupted by the Grizzled Young Veterans, who eventually jumped. I thought the jump and the Grizzled Young Veterans part of this was fine. The double promo leading, waiting for a promo, again, it drives me mad. It happens so much on this television show where these people come out to say nothing. And like, at the very least, like Zach Gibson and James Gray, they had a reason to be there. They jumped them. They want to be involved in this tag team title feud. All that's perfectly good. We have a little three-way title feud going on. But God, those promos, they're just there for no reason.
I was all ready to say, like I kind of complimented AEW earlier. I like how other people exist while one feud is happening. I was like, oh cool, they're kind of like spinning that off in that direction, even though the long-term feud seems to be that way. But then I thought about it, it's like, nah, they're probably just going to end up having a triple threat match, aren't they?
They're definitely having a triple threat match, yes.
It's not that they're temporarily between takeovers, they're having a little bit of a diversion, but the other team and the other feud still exists while it's happening. It's that they're, oh no, we're just going to do it again, but with 3 teams this time, which is far less credit worthy, even though it would probably still be quite a good match, but worse than any 2v2 combination would be.
Sure thing. Austin Theory defeated Isaiah Scott. I think a fun little mid-card match.
Yeah, One thing that really stuck out to me, and I'm not sure if it's just because WWN's camera shooting is always really bad, but like it hadn't really sunk into me how jacked Theory was. Like he is in incredible, ridiculous shape in a promotion in WWE where like a lot of people are in really good shape. He's like a cut above. It's weird how huge he is for his frame.
I guess because WWN shoot from the floor up, as opposed to NXT, which usually are more like head on. Mm-hmm. You're probably more likely to notice his physique. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Like, even though like kind of in his entrance they do go from kind of like the floor up, but it's like it's lit differently.
Yeah.
Anyway, it just jumped out at me. I was like, damn, that's a very muscular man.
He's in very good shape.
That's the only thing I was impressed by him though. Like he's nowhere near a bad wrestler. He's quite a good wrestler, but like whenever I watch him, I'm like, I'm never impressed, but I can't quite pick out why I'm not impressed.
He bumps and he feeds well, but I don't think he's ever particularly interesting when he's like on top or controlling a match. So like I think he's a good like mid-card heel foil for whoever you're actually pushing, that they'll look good beating him, and if they're good, they can have a good match with them. But I'd never be like, all right, Austin Theory, we have this greenhorn, and we really need you to carry him. And I would never look to Austin Theory to do that, because I don't think that's in his wheelhouse. Yeah, I don't know. I've called him a Mike Bennett. I still think he's a bit of a Mike Bennett. I think he's probably a little better than Mike Bennett. But in terms of like me pigeonholing him into a role on a television show, I think he's a Mike Bennett.
Yeah, he's a guy who's like, and it's weird because on the surface he's not this thing, but bear with me. He's like an answer to the people who say you only like these certain indie wrestlers because they do cool moves, because he does quite cool moves, but it doesn't connect in the same way. It's the way he strings them together. He just doesn't quite have the dynamism despite doing dynamic things, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it just doesn't quite click in the way that it does for like elite tier guys. It's odd because it looks like he has all the pieces, but it just doesn't quite fit together, I guess. But he is still very young. Yes. And new to wrestling, so maybe they will at some point.
Though the problem is he's in the one place on earth where wrestlers don't really develop.
Very true, very true.
Which is always a problem for a developmental territory, which I guess, is it still? It kind of is, I guess. But yeah, he beat Isaiah Scott. His finish is a TKO, which I'm always... TKOs are flatliners. If that's your finish, think about it a little longer, please. Mauro Ranallo interviewed Johnny Gargano. Oh boy. Johnny is very angry because Mauro is mean to him, and he's like, you betrayed NXT, and like Johnny's perfectly reasonable in his anger because like Ciampa has stalked his wife and really made his life miserable. So it's understandable why Johnny Gargano does not like this man, and he's presented as the villain, and Mauro Ranallo's just like, I'm uncomfortable, leave me alone. And it's like, you embraced him, he came back, and you're shouting daddy's home. It's like, again, why is Johnny the heel here? He's right. And he's not. He didn't even do something that's like, oh, it's despicable. You know, if he tried to break Ciampa's leg, he'd be like, oh, well, he went too far in his quest for revenge. He cost him a title match. That's fair. That's like a fair return for everything Ciampa has done to Gargano.
There's a couple of things that just get in the way from this story really working, and the first is that in the classic WWE black and white thing, Ciampa is presented as the good guy, Gargano as the bad guy. If they kind of did like a Shades of Grey thing where it was like, ooh, choose your side type deal, and there's not a clear good guy and a clear bad guy, that could kind of work. But the biggest problem of all of it is that like Gargano was okay with him coming back and was happily teaming with him and friends with him for a bit. So like, why is he mad that other people were happy that he was back, because he was also happy that he was back for a while as well?
As I said, they do this all the time. They pretend that the story they're telling is the story they told all along, and it exceedingly rarely actually is, so that when you actually look at it and say, well, you know, he returned and they were friends and they teamed for a while, why is he so mad? Why did it take... And it's not like Ciampa did something to slight him in the meantime, but then at the same time, Ciampa did horrible things to Gargano, so his anger at Ciampa is perfectly justified. And Ciampa's, he's a babyface just because they tell you he is. I don't think he does anything that's particularly likable. And it's just one of those things where it's like, if they actually told the story that they say they're telling, you'd be like, oh, well, that makes sense. But they're not. They're like, these are the steps we pretended we took.
Yeah, like, it's weird because they get close to it, and then, like, they tell you that they told a story that if they did tell would be quite good. So you're like, oh, you're close. You just didn't plan ahead and do it. You just kind of thought of it too late and went, oh, yeah, we did that. And because if they did, like, well, Ciampa came back, and the fans were really happy that a guy came back, but Johnny was like, no, fuck this guy. Why are you happy he's back? He screwed me for so long, and just because he got injured and came back, now you're a fan of him, and then he attacks Ciampa, and the fans are like, hey, you're as bad as him now, we don't like you, we prefer this other guy, and Gargano's like, well, fuck off, I've been the same guy, this guy screwed me, I still hate him. That's a good story. That's a good story. That's an interesting way to do a double turn. And that kind of leans into your own fan base. It's reacting to the way the reactions would go. But they didn't do that. And you've said it several times, and it's a beautiful way of putting it. They don't tell the story that they tell you they're telling. And it's a shame, because the stories usually aren't that bad. But they haven't been told.
It really is so close, isn't it? It's like, if we told this story, by God, it would be a great one, wouldn't it? They should actually just like go back and edit NXT, just like directors cut it so that it starts making sense.
It's like if you could retroactively work the stories, because the endpoints they get to have the things that go. They have the builds to them that would work really well, but they didn't do it. They didn't do the story. Like, I hadn't thought about it this way until you'd had me on for this podcast, and it's fascinating. They figure out good stories, but they figure them out like 3 months too late, because they figure out the story they want to tell after they would have already needed to tell it.
It's why this show is kind of infuriating.
God, I'm glad I'm only doing this as a one-off, because this would melt my brain doing it every week.
Trying to piece together the weird storytelling of WWE NXT, and like when you piece it together, it's like, oh God, you really did come close. You really did. Though, speaking of something that doesn't come anywhere near it, though, our Steel Cage main event, in which I don't even think the cage match was good. Never mind it being an escape to cage match. It wasn't like it. This didn't even have the good work of the match, the opening match. This was just Velveteen Dream, who's going to be main eventing the next takeover, out for revenge. Like, there's a period in this match where Dream just hits a low blow. I'm like, are you just the heel now? Is that just how we're doing this?
Cole's popular enough to be a face, but it's not what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's bizarre. Like, and as you say, this was a match where, like, if the first match was like a match ruined by being the stipulation, despite their hard work, this was a match that was terrible and made worse by the stipulation. And as you said, as typical with all WWE matches, the stipulation works the opposite way it should do. The idea of the cage match is to keep people out, so obviously in cage matches are the matches you have the most interference in WWE.
It makes perfect sense. Don't question it.
And the other thing with this one is it's the biggest, most obvious indication I've had of the problem with having wins and losses not matter in a promotion at all, was that Dream chose to lose the match on purpose, and it was in the logic of the promotion, that was the good thing to do.
It was perfectly, and he'll still get the title shot.
And he'll get a title shot by losing the big blow-off on purpose.
Don't question WWE storytelling, it all makes sense. This valiant babyface deliberately lost so he could trap somebody else in a cage and fight him. It's after he stalked that other guy's family, and he hit a low blow, and he's a perfectly likable guy who's going to have his crowning moment in Tampa, and everyone will be happy? Question mark?
Like, why would you ever care? Like, why would you ever care about the result of any match when they're literally telling you the people who are competing in the matches don't care about winning unless it's a title match?
And they'll be rewarded for not caring about winning. That's the extra step. It's like, not only do they not care about it, that he will not be punished for not caring. Like, if he lost this match, it would actually make so much. Again, oh god, we're gonna fix NXT stories again. It would make so much more sense if the guy, like, if he was in this match with Adam Cole, non-title, say, and the guy he's feuding with is Roderick Strong, and he deliberately loses the match against Cole to get at Strong, then you don't have to book him in a title match, so you could at least explain it away that, you know, he's being punished at least for not for refusing to win the match, for deliberately losing the match, and then you build toward the big match with Strong. But no, he's going to get the title shot for losing. They'll do another step. He'll win a number one contenders match, I'm sure. But why is he getting the number one contenders match? He just lost to Roderick Strong.
Velveteen Dream is like everything. He is like NXT incarnate at this point, in all the bad ways. Like, he is the over-the-top dramatic matches. He's the guy who thinks he's telling the wonderful story but isn't. He's the guy who thinks he's being really creative but is just being unlikable when he's meant to be the good guy. He's just not very good. Like, he was a guy with a lot of potential and has seemed to get worse, but they pushed him more.
Makes perfect sense.
And again, to that audience, and it's always weird because it's a small audience in Full Sail, and it's also kind of, a lot of the reactions feel a little artificial, but he is over to a main event level in front of those 800 people. But are people invested in this guy?
He wasn't over last week. Last week, like, there was weird silence for his, or 2 weeks ago. When did he wrestle Strong in the singles match? I bet 2 weeks ago. There was a weird silence for that match. Like, I was like, as much as I'll give, I don't think it made any sense. The very end of the show felt like a hot angle. As I said, wrestling has to appeal to your heart, not to your brain. But to your heart, I think that felt like a hot angle. You know, the people were really into him finally getting his hands on Cole, I guess, because he's going to get a title match. But like, when you scratch at the surface of NXT and you realize, and you see through the facade, and you're like, oh, there's nothing underneath. And like, the substance of this entire show just is not there. It's like, optically, when that crowd, as you said, somewhat artificial, somewhat performatively enjoy this show, because there's weeks where it's very clear that when they're not performatively enjoying the show, a lot of stuff dies a death. And I don't think people are very organically over on this show. But that closing angle felt, you know, the crowd were super into it when he was beating up Adam Cole and fending off Undisputed Era, and, you know, it felt like a hot angle, but scratch below the surface, think about it for a minute, and it just crumbles to pieces. Especially with everything Velveteen Dream has done since he's come back has been absolutely baffling. It's like, oh, I'm going to stalk this man's family and put his child on my crotch, and I'm like, wait, babyface? What? And then I'm going to beat Roderick Strong, which will lead to me having a cage match with Roderick Strong for reasons passing comprehension. Then everybody's going to interfere in that steel cage match. Then I'm going to deliberately lose that steel cage match so I can trap Adam Cole in the steel cage, in which we have established people can get in and out of willy-nilly. But I just don't get it. It's there's no substance there, and every time you try to look for substance, it exposes the degree to which there is no substance there. And people will always say, "Oh, you're just nitpicking, you're picking holes," and I will always insist, good art should hold up to nitpicking. You know, diving deeper into storytelling should not make it worse. It should usually, if it's good storytelling, make it better. And very little of NXT's storytelling is made better by thinking about it.
There's degrees to stuff that it's like, well, it's wrestling, and you're over nitpicking. I think surface level thinking about the stories making sense is not that. I think that's called thinking about something. That's not nitpicking. That's engaging with the art.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, WWE is not meant to be engaged with.
No, it usually punishes being engaged with.
Like, even like the show ending angle, like, he did all this, he purposely lost the match to lock himself in the cage with alone with Adam Cole, bearing in mind that Adam Cole hadn't wrestled that night and he'd just wrestled a match. So he was locking himself in there with the champion when he was tired and the champion wasn't. And then it earned him about 30 seconds with Cole before Roddy also got in the ring. So he did all this elaborate setup, which I think maybe we're meant to think the only reason he was ever feuding with Strong was to get to Cole, was for 30 seconds in the ring, in the cage with Dream. And maybe we're meant to think Adam Cole's going to get really mad by this thing, and he's going to grant him the title shot because he feels that he's been... But, like, it was a 30-second thing. Like, logically, Cole should just be like, no, screw you, lost the match. Why should you get a title shot? It's so annoying, this show, because you look at, like, the actual matches, and aside from the cage matches in WWE are horrible, like, the wrestling on this show was pretty good. It's just... You can't think about a show. And if you can't think about a show, how can you enjoy it?
You turn your brain off and mindless throne. I really do think like Joe Lanza has the what color is Sasha Banks' hair level of engagement. Like, legitimately, I think that's the only way you can enjoy the show, by taking absolutely everything you're given at face value. Which is not the way I consume anything. It's not the way I can consume anything. I will be driven crazy. I tried to do that with WWE last year. Listen to the episode of Shake Them Ropes, where I tried to be positive and take everything from WWE at face value. I was broken very quickly. But that, I do think that's the only way you can really enjoy this storytelling, is by taking everything they tell you at face value, what they say is true, and don't think about it. Otherwise, it just crumbles. It crumbles to pieces.
And not what they told you last week as true, what you told you this week as true, and then next week ignore what they told you last week, because that's no longer true, because that's not what they're telling you anymore. So it's only true for the moment they're telling you it.
Yep.
As soon as it's gone, it's no longer true again.
You can't think about it afterwards. You're not allowed. You're banned.
It's amnesia entertainment.
I joked that you're actively punished for engaging with, but you really are. Like, if you think about the beats of the long-term Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa story, you're punished, because it doesn't make sense. And if you think about the long-term beats of the Undisputed Era against Velveteen Dream story, you're punished, because again, it doesn't make sense. And that happens with pretty much everything on this show.
Like, you can tell I don't think I've ever done a WWE related podcast before, because the problem with doing a podcast is that it makes you think about it, and usually I just I go, well, it's not for me, so I won't think about it, so I won't really engage with it, and I'll pop in every now and again when a match gets hyped, and I'll enjoy the match and go, that was a cool match. And then this once you do me the wonderful boon of inviting me to watch 2 hours of an okay but less good than most of the other Dynamites that have been this year, and then this show, which is like an okay NXT, and I was like, well, that was an okay show. Now I need to think about it to talk about it. Oh no, I've thought about it. Oh no, my mind.
Do you know how often that happens? If you remember, before the show, I was telling you the format of the show is that we decide which show is better, and I'm still on the fence about which show I prefer. And then we talk for about an hour, which is much longer than we usually talk about NXT, but you're a guest, we'll allow it, for talking about WWE NXT. And I can't in good faith say it was the better television show.
It's bizarre, because I am a guy who is about the wrestling. I'm a guy who parachutes into lots of different promotions and watches the matches, and the wrestling on NXT was better than on Dynamite this week, in my opinion. It's blurred a bit by how bad their stipulations for the cage matches are, but like, the wrestling parts were probably better. Like, we're going to talk about what we thought was the best match of the week. I thought it was fairly comfortably the Red Dragon, I've done it again, damn you, David Richards, the Undisputed Era tag match. I thought that was fairly comfortably the best match of the week. And yet AEW, by having a slightly underwhelming show by their standards, win by a mile by making sense. It's so easy for them.
The narrowest of margins.
They make sense.
So there you go. That's NXT. I don't think you'll be watching a full episode of NXT next week.
I hope Larkin gets a house, because this has broken my brain enough. This is the good WWE show. This is the good one.
I came to a realization last week that Raw is probably a better show than NXT.
Raw's 3 hours.
But that's true. It's a slog. But like SmackDown is like the objective worst one. SmackDown's unwatchable. And then Raw is like, it tries to be good and occasionally gets there. And then NXT is just kind of weirdly infuriating, even though there's good wrestling there. And it's just, why are all these shows like this? Why can't there... Oh, there is a good show. It's AEW Dynamite. But that's neither here nor there. Match of the week. What's your favourite match this week, Rob?
I thought that the Lorcan and Birch versus Undisputed Era tag match was very good. Nothing like blow away, but like, 3 3/4 stars. That would be my favourite.
I'm on the fence, because it's either that or Jericho and Sammy against technically Jon Moxley and Darby Allin.
See, that was more memorable.
That's my problem. It's like, which of these matches will I remember?
It feels more like a segment than a match, which is a weird wrestling thing that you can go like, well, I thought that was the match that was the better segment wasn't the better match, which is a very wrestling nerdy thing, but that's just how I do it in my head, and I can't undo that. I can't unthink about wrestling that way, but I would completely understand you saying that was the better thing.
And I think I will, because I like Darby Allin a lot. I will remember that match, and I as good as the Undisputed Era against Lorcan and Birch match. In 3 years' time, do you think there's a hope in hell I'm remembering that random good tag match from this random episode of NXT? Probably not.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
And show of the week. Which show did you prefer?
NXT. No. Yeah, if I didn't make it obvious, I thought like this was by this year's standards quite an underwhelming Dynamite, but it made sense, so it wins.
And again, this is another episode where I was legitimately on the fence. I'm like, I think both of these shows were decent, not great, and then we reach the end of this podcast of 2 hours of tearing these, like the length of watching one of those shows is the length it takes you to listen to this podcast that was tearing apart. And eventually I just reached the stage where it's like, I just can't give it to NXT. There's just, it's if they sat down and thought about what they're going to do for the next 4 weeks and then executed that story, maybe they'd get there. But no, they tried that in reverse, and it doesn't make any sense. So yes, I'm also All Elite Wrestling Dynamite. Our fan poll, our wonderful 184 people voted in the Twitter poll, 84% for AEW, 16% for WWE NXT. So it is a 3-0 landslide.
Boom.
Before we go, Rob, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I don't have a lot to plug anymore now that I'm not doing much in regards to wrestling, but you can still follow me for my wrestling takes over on @BritWrestRound, BritWres Round. Or if you want to read me talk about darts, which I'm currently watching in the background, which I'm sure many of you do, you can follow me at TheRDouble, or if you want to, if you play Legends of Runeterra, hit me up there, because I am playing a lot of that at the moment, and I want people to play with.
You can follow me on Twitter at GarrettKidney, or ETTKIDNEY. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at WarGamesPod. Liam's not here, but I'm sure he'd tell you can follow him on Twitter at Larrikin, LARIKN. If you'd like more Elite coverage in your Voices of Wrestling podcasting feed, you see that little podcast, Everything Elite. They talk about a lot more than the television show. So you can listen to all things Elite there. Or Shake Them Ropes covers all other WWE related shows, and I think they cover other TV shows these days. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.